Barry, welcome to Just Learning. Now,
Thank you.
just explain to me, what is the advantage of sitting in front of a computer screen for an e-learning module over having a booklet which you can carry around and refer to at will?
Well, with good e-learning, the advantage is around interactivity and engagement. So, whilst a book is a very useful tool and a very useful piece of technology, let's not forget it's a piece of technology, it's quite passive. So it's very good for imparting longer term knowledge, but where you want to actually engage the learner, to actually get them involved, the use of multimedia, video, interactive quizzes and so on within the e-learning module is a real advantage for the learner. Mm-hmm. There are all sorts of advantages, of course, for the organisation as well, in terms of someone not having to travel to workshops, so being able to actually access content 24/7. So particularly if you're in an organisation with night shift workers, or where you need people facing customers quite regularly, so you have an opportunity cost in taking people away from their role, there's a real advantage there in being able to have people access short pieces of content as they need it.
And they can go home and do their homework on their own computer.
They can, yes.
So just talk me through how you actually built up the various modules, what you were looking for within individual departments to ensure that everybody got the training that they needed.
Yeah. Well, when we first launched the project at B&Q, the idea was to look for the kind of content that most people would need to do. So the idea was to introduce it to people early on in their career with B&Q. So one of the first modules we produced was around health and safety, because that's a key topic that everybody needs to be trained on. So we were able to introduce that, train everybody already in the business, and as every new starter joined the business, train them as well on that one topic and get them used to using e-learning. We then looked at a set of criteria on why you would use e-learning for particular content. So we looked at where you want a consistent message, so health and safety, as I've mentioned, issues such as shrinkage, things such as...
When you talk about shrinkage, you mean?
Theft by shoplifters, or also just general waste within a store through poor admin. And topics like diversity, which are it's quite important that you've got a consistent message.
Impact and consistency, they're two words that you use quite a bit in that answer. Yeah. The consistency being presumably the advantage that it means that all staff throughout the country are all being trained on the same subject to the same level.
Absolutely, yes. Particularly with topics like health and safety, that's important because you need to be able to demonstrate that consistency. But it's also important when you think of issues like customer service, where you want everybody to have the same standard of customer service, everyone to have the same understanding of the expectations of customer service. And it's critical that just because you're somewhere like London, where you might have an awful lot of exposure to other trainers, to managers, you shouldn't be getting necessarily a better standard of training than someone who's in the wilds of Scotland, who may not have access to that face-to-face training activity.
Many of the things that you've talked about are sort of fairly generic, like health and safety and so on. But presumably you had to produce different modules for people who were at managerial level compared with those who were working on the shop floor, as it were, who were dealing with thousands of different commodities within a single store.
Yes, we did, and we actually started off solely focusing on that customer advisor population, so the non-management teams in store, and that's 36,000 people, so quite a significant audience. And the focus there was initially around product and process. And it was only later that we then started producing a suite of modules specifically for the management population. So around topics such as coaching, mentoring, interview skills, appraisals, those kind of activities. And there was probably more of a challenge in producing that content for managers. They had a higher expectation in terms of the standard they'd reach. And there is also, I suppose, it's kind of accepted that every so often the manager gets to go off for a day and sit in a nice classroom somewhere and have a nice lunch. So things are a little bit different when they're being asked to go and sit in front of a PC for a period of time.
Now, we've all heard about the silver surfers, so we know that, you know, they're great when it comes to using computers and technology. But did you find that your e-learning modules had to be adjusted in any way to suit your more mature members of staff?
When we first started, we did actually introduce one e-learning module, which was called An Introduction to E-Learning. And it was very, very simple. It taught people how to use a mouse. It taught people how to click on things on screen, to chase objects around the screen. And it was very, very basic. And it was aimed particularly at that over 50 audience. But we found that after about 3 years, we were actually able to withdraw that module because more and more of the people, particularly the older people that were coming to work for us, already had exposure to these kind of technologies. And quite frequently, people will retire, they'll potter around at home for 2 or 3 years, which is when they'll start to get some computer experience, and then they'll actually come and work for B&Q. There's actually, I think, more of a challenge with the younger generation.
Really?
Because it's very easy to get them, they know how to use the technology, they know how to use a mouse, to use a keyboard, but they're used to a much faster pace. So actually being able to produce a piece of content that you can work through quite slowly if you're more methodical, less used to these things, that is actually also going to satisfy someone that is used to that kind of on-demand content that's being pushed out all the time, whether it's by your phone or by TV or by the internet or any other source. That's much more of a challenge.
But obviously one that you managed to meet.
I hope so.
Because, I mean, it was started in the year 2000, so we're going 8 years now.
Yeah.
I mean, how would you sum up the advantages that you found of e-learning? And indeed, have you seen really sort of a major improvement in the skill levels and the training levels of the people who are working for B&Q?
Yes, I think we have. And I do think it's important to say that it's not just about e-learning, and it never was just about e-learning. If you go back to 99, 2000, when many organisations were introducing e-learning, and e-learning was often being sold as something that would replace face-to-face training, that was never the approach at B&Q. We actually introduced e-learning with the idea of increasing face-to-face training, because what we wanted to do was make sure that those topics that were best suited to technology were delivered by technology, those topics best suited to delivering face-to-face were done face-to-face. When we used to build content back in the early days, we built quite large pieces of content that were designed to replace courses. Over time, we moved to much, much smaller pieces of content that weren't designed to replace a whole day's training, but were designed to, if you were going to go and do a recruitment interview and you think, it's been a long time since I've done this, I just need to refresh my memory, you can go and pull a 5-minute piece of content rather than sit down through 2 hours of content or book yourself on a course that's 2 or 3 years away. And I think that step of saying you don't have to do these big pieces of learning, and in effect you don't have to do
You can dip in and
that.
out.
Yeah, you can do it when you need it at the point of demand.
Yeah. That's an interesting development, isn't it, in
It is,
e-learning?
yeah.
Are you finding that there's still room for improvement, that it's still actually a great sort of learning curve for you personally in putting these modules together, but also a very exciting thing for the future in the way of training people?
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest changes we're seeing at the moment is, whilst there's still a great reliance on e-learning content, there's a shift to more kind of social media technologies, so replicating the ideas you get in tools like Facebook, where people are actually able to go online, post questions of people actually already doing the job. Things like YouTube, where you're actually able to take short homemade pieces of video content of somebody actually doing something and put that online so easily and so quickly and so cheaply as well. It's a really powerful way of communicating.
Exciting developments for the future. Barry, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.